Hi, my name is William Lawson. This is the Morning Report. The past week has delivered a trio of stories that at first blush seem disconnected. Builders are announcing a plan to construct 1 million new homes that they're calling Trump homes to ease America's housing affordability crisis. A Minnesota family has chosen to voluntarily self-deport rather than to live in a climate of fear. And the American Society of Plastic Surgeons has publicly opposed gender affirming surgery for minors. Now, together, these narratives tell us something powerful about where the country is headed. The emotions animating public life and the culture and political forces shaping the next chapter of American society. These stories reveal a nation wrestling with economic desperation, immigration anxiety, and questions about identity and medical ethics, all at the same moment that political polarization and policy experimentation are at peak intensity. They are snapshots of life in 2026 America.
Are you tired of funding woke corporations? At Mammoth Nation, shop American owned businesses that share your values. Get exclusive member only deals that pay for themselves. Join the America First Marketplace at mammoth.com.
Hi, welcome back. Now, America across the country have watched the cost of housing, already the dominant political issue for years. They've watched it climb even higher. So, for many middle class and working families, the dream of home ownership has gone from an attainable milestone to a distant fantasy. And into that void steps an ambitious private sector idea. A major home builder, actually two, in coordination with policy priorities tied to President Trump's administration, are rolling out a plan to construct up to 1 million so-called Trump houses, aimed squarely at the first-time homebuyer. And the affordability crisis that has vexed policymakers on both sides of the aisle. You see, they have been trying to approach this problem from the wrong side. The only way to approach this problem is from the supply side. There needs to be more houses, not restrain the money or make the money harder, but have more property, have more things to sell. So these homes are envisioned as entry level units. Remember entry level houses that when you weren't watching HGTV and everybody wanted, a large kitchen with a monstrous island and all sorts of stainless steel furniture, right? Got to have a pool. You know what I'm saying? So these aren't those. These aren't those. These aren't those HTGV TV houses that the first home buyers got to have everything they want and it's got to be perfect. This is not what this is. These are entry level units. They're smaller, they're more affordable, and they're structured with pathways to ownership that differ from the conventional model. Some versions of the plan would allow renters to apply a portion of their rent towards a future down payment after a fixed amount of time in the unit. That bridges the gap between renting and owning in an era where down payments are prohibitive for a lot of folks. This initiative isn't coming from thin air. The Trump White House has openly made housing affordability a policy priority, with broader initiatives aimed at addressing the issue that go well beyond homes, from plans to let Americans tap into their 401k, retirement accounts for housing down payments, penalty free, to executive moves targeting large institutional investors like BlackRock and the like, hoarding single family homes. And the administration has singled it views the housing market as central to its economic narrative. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know about where you live, but where I live, a lot of the empty homes are being bought up by investors. We without cloaked, I would get 10 or 15 calls from real estate investors every week. Every week. Now, my standard reply to them is when they text me, Now, those I still get occasionally, even with cloaked. Um, I always write back. Offers start at $10 million for my house. No, my house is not worth $10 million, but don't tell nobody, right? And I always go offers start at $10 million. Are you in? Are you out? If you're out, take my name off your list. And before they can do that, I always just stop them from sending me text anymore, right? All right. So on the surface, there's a clear conservative virtue here. Private builders stepping up with market-based solutions and an administration that wants to reduce regulatory barriers, stimulate supply, and strengthen the American dream of home ownership. Supporters frame this as restoring common sense fairness, making sure working families get a shot at equity and stability that home ownership uniquely offers. But of course, the critics are already lining up with skepticism. Analysts point out that even banning large institutional buyers, a piece of Trump's wider strategy, might not actually move the housing market needle much because those big investors already own a relatively small share of single family homes in many regions and tend to operate in market niches where inventory isn't the main constraint. Others caution that tapping retirement funds can create a long-term financial risk for families already struggling with retirement readiness. I just had a thought. You know what happens? You tap into the 401k early, and you know who you pay back? Yourself. You take a loan and you pay that money back yourself. Now, if I'm a year away from retirement, no, I don't tap into my 401k to put a down payment on a house. That's dumb, especially when you're not going to be repaying it back for a long amount of time. But again, that plan is for, and these houses are for first time buyers, younger people, younger me, younger people trying to get their first house. If they have some money they can tap into in their 401k, you use it. If it gets used for a down payment, great. That's what this is about. So whether Trump homes actually deliver cheaper attainable housing or end up being a political talking point rather than an economic transformation remains to be seen, of course. But the political logic is clear. Housing costs have become one of the most potent voter issues heading into the 2026 midterms, and the public wants action. So across the political spectrum, the housing story hits on the core themes of prosperity, economic mobility, generational opportunity, and the fundamental question conservatives have a long championed is the American dream still available to every American who works hard and plays by the rule. We'll be back right after this.
Are you tired of funding woke corporations? At Mammoth Nation, shop American-owned businesses that share your values. Get exclusive member-only deals that pay for themselves. Join the America First Marketplace at mammoth.com.
Welcome back. In a quiet human moment hidden beneath policy headlines, a Minnesota family made a decision that crystallizes how immigration enforcement policy is reshaping lives across the country. Faced with a mounting fear of detention and deportation under a more aggressive federal immigration enforcement posture, this family that we're talking about, fearing separation and legal peril, opted to self-deport. They returned to Ecuador voluntarily so they could avoid the uncertainty and risk of potential enforcement. Now, that decision strikes at the heart of the immigration debate in America today. It's not about numbers on the border or legal frameworks in Washington. It's about families living in a climate of fear so incredibly intense that choosing to walk away from the life that they've built, feels safer than staying. Local reporting highlights the emotional toll of this choice. Children too young to work, expressing devastation, parents grappling with the wrenching reality of deporting a place that they had hoped to call home, and relatives left behind uncertain of their future or their safety. This narrative interacts with national policy in raw, visceral terms. The Trump administration has signaled a tougher stance on illegal immigration, pushing for enforcement that goes beyond simply stopping border crossings and actively pursuing options for removing people residing unlawfully within the country. To supporters on that approach, this story underscores why enforcement policy matters. They see it as a necessary consequence for the rule of law and a demonstration that illegal immigration carries weighty consequences. They argue that legal immigration channels exist precisely to manage orderly and a fair entry, noting that voluntary departure doesn't necessarily close the door forever. Families can come back through lawful processes if they meet the criteria. To critics, however, the real tragedy is not the enforcement itself, but the climate of fear it creates. What they're missing is it is the rioters and the protesters on the left, by not doing things in an orderly fashion, and the politicians there not allowing ICE to go into the local jails of people who have been detained and turning them over to ICE. Those are the people that are causing what we're seeing in the streets in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The critics are going to say that the enforcement itself, is a climate of fear, particularly when it affects families, children, and communities. They argue that immigration policy should be humane, predictable. It is humane and predictable if local officials follow the law and reconcilable with modern American labor needs and societal realities. For them, every self-deportation is a human story of loss and cultural trauma. One thing, however, is undeniable. Immigration in America is not just a matter of headlines anymore. It's deeply personal for millions of people. And when those stories intersect with law enforcement, policy, public opinion isn't modeled by abstract numbers. It's forged in a lived experience. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Willie Lawson of the Morning Report. In all our work here on the Morning Report and Fight Back Media, what we have found being true is one thing for sure. Godly principles are lacking on both sides of the aisle. And many organizations are putting profits before people. Our friend at 7 Weeks Coffee was started to reverse that trend and live out their calling as believers in the marketplace. As a value-based business, 7 Weeks Coffee has a simple and transparent mission: to donate 10% of every sale to pregnancy care centers across the nation. They are committed to earning your trust, not expecting it. And how do they do this? By leading with their values, showing the impact, and providing the highest quality product. Y'all know I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative, and 7 Weeks Coffee unapologetically supports pregnancy centers across the nation. Join us by letting your coffee serve a greater purpose. Welcome back. The third piece of this moment, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons taking a public stance opposing gender-affirming surgeries for minors. This lands squarely in a different realm: cultural identity and medical ethics. This development makes the American Society for Plastic Surgeons the first medical association to recommend delaying gender-related surgical procedures until patients reach the age of adulthood, at least 19. citing concerns about scientifically uncertain long-term outcomes and irreversible consequences. This change does not include recommendations on hormone therapy or puberty blockers, but it makes a significant shift in a major slice of the medical establishment's position. It also mirrors a growing global trend among medical authorities in countries like Sweden and Finland that have taken a more cautious stance on youth transition related surgery. What makes this especially politically and culturally potent is that it's a context. Nationwide debates on transgender policies have become some of the most emotionally charged issues in America, from bathrooms to sports leagues to educational policy and healthcare access. Questions about how society should support, regulate, or restrict gender affirming care draws sharp lines between competing visions of freedom, parental rights, and scientific oversight. Supporters of broader access to care see conservative retrenchment as an attack on individual liberty, and so vulnerable young people seeking to align their bodies with their identity. They argue that parents, doctors, and patients, not bureaucrats or administrative bodies, should make deeply personal decisions about medical care. Opponents, including many conservatives, say that some medical professionals argue that irreversible medical interventions require caution and that minors may lack the capacity to fully understand long-term implications. Minors, we got grown-ass adults who don't really seem to understand long-term implications. This clash reflects broader cultural fault lines about the role of medicine, gender norms, and societal values. The American Society for Plastic Surgery stance doesn't end the broader debate. If anything, it intensifies it. But it does provide cover for lawmakers and activists who have called for tighter restrictions. And it raises substantive questions about medical ethics, consent, patient autonomy, and the age at which someone should make life altering decisions. Okay, so once you decide that you don't want your penis anymore and you would rather a vagina, and that happens, then all sorts of, I mean, that sets all sorts of things into action physically, physiologically, psychologically, and some of which do not resolve themselves because it's long term. It's forever. And a society already polarized by these issues, moments like this don't just say, oh, so just stay in the journal pages. They become political flashpoints that animate voters, that influence social school policy debates, and make their way into legislative chambers at both the state and the federal. At 7 Weeks Coffee, every sip defends life. We give 10% of every sale to pro-life pregnancy centers across America. Drink coffee with conviction, because your brew should stand for something. At bottom, these three narratives, housing policy, immigration realities, and medical ethics, are all snapshots of a country in transition. They show Americans wrestling with existential questions about how we define and achieve economic opportunity in the era of elevated cost pressures. What fairness and justice mean in a society with porous borders and contested immigration policy? How do we balance individual liberty rights with social norms and medical prudence? From builders proposing a bold housing initiative rooted in market mechanisms to families fleeing for fear and choosing self-deportation, to medical professionals recalibrating standards of care for youth. These stories are about real people in real struggles, and the ways public policy, cultural change, and political debate intersect in very powerful ways. So, for conservative audiences focused on restoring a vision of the American dream rooted in opportunity, stability, and the rule of law, these narratives resonate deeply, or they should. They reveal a nation that is simultaneously tackling affordability through market friendly solutions, enforcing laws around immigration with real consequences, and pushing back against cultural trends viewed as unmoored from tradition and caution. No single story stands alone. Together, they illuminate a moment of contention, aspiration, and fierce debate in the American experience. And they remind us that the country's future will be shaped just as much by individual families and marketplaces as by politicians, pundits, policymakers, podcasters. Until we see you again, my name is Willie Lawson, and this has been the Mona Report. Go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We'll see you when we see you. Bye bye now.